last year, I broke from my usual repertoire to talk about the live-action Monster High movie. No, not the Nickelodeon exclusive TV film based on the toy line, but the 1989 dark comedy that nobody saw and nobody remembers. And as somebody who unfortunately had to sit through it multiple times to make that video, and who is still seeking therapy to this day because of it, I wish I could still consider myself part of that group. But seeing as how Nickelodeon has already shit out a sequel to the first one, I guess it's time again to capitalize on the hype with my own look at the sequel to the original live-action Monster High movie, Monster High 2. Oh wait, that doesn't exist. Oh well, I guess I can still find some stupid horror movie to keep this tradition alive. Let's see, stupid horror movie, stupid horror movie, stupid horror movie. Oh, I know, Dracula 3000. The Legend of Dracula is a long and storied one. To the point, countless long and storied documentaries have already been made exploring it, so I'll just give you the bullet points. Theater manager and part-time author Abraham Bram Stoker first had his famous vampire novel published in 1897. While far from the first vampire story, or even English vampire novel, it was an attempt to tie the vampires of ancient Slavic folklore with British society of the time, especially the Gothic subculture that was popular throughout the mid to late 19th century. Yeah, the tradition of wearing heavy makeup and dark bondage gear is surprisingly a lot older than you'd imagine. Instead of depicting vampires as the mostly mindless undead monsters most folklore saw them as, Stoker wrote Dracula as a deranged but educated aristocrat. His main influence being not Vlad the Impaler or Elizabeth Bathory, as many assume, but Carmilla from the 1872 novella of the same name. Yes, the same story that inspired that Vampires vs. Zombies movie I featured that one time. Dracula was basically written as a gender-swapped version of that character, including adopting her ability to shapeshift in animals and an unquenchable taste and lust for women, while also originating aversions to garlic, sunlight, and crucifixes, tropes that would influence vampire lore to this day. While receiving mostly positive reviews at the time of release, it was largely ignored by the public, resulting in middling sales and, even up to the author's death, was seen as one of Stoker's lesser-known works. And that would probably still be the case, if not for the 1922 German film Nosferatu, one of the earliest known attempts to adapt the book to film, and one of the earliest examples of a copyright infringement lawsuit. Shortly after its premiere, it was brought to the attention of Florence Stoker, wife of the late author, and since at the time Stoker's estate still owned the rights, she sued the studio for its illegal adaptation. While the producers insisted that they changed enough to make Nosferatu a separate film, certain promotional material still claimed it as an adaptation of Dracula, and thus the studio was sued into bankruptcy, with all prints seemingly destroyed. Save for one that was smuggled into the USA, where the book was technically public domain, thus preserving it to this day. The years-long court battle would also see Florence, desperate for money, officially license the story as a stage play in exchange for royalties. And it would be the play, which heavily toned down the violence and suggestive themes of the book, that most later depictions would actually take the most inspiration from. Especially Dracula's new, less beastly, more regal persona, perfected by longtime lead performer Bela Lugosi. His reprisal in the successful 1931 film adaptation of the play by Universal Studios officially cementing that version as the definitive Dracula, down to Lugosi's own accent and appearance, and making Dracula, previously a little-known character from a little-known book, synonymous with vampire mythos. It would be this version that would inspire many future productions to use the Dracula name, including the Hammer horror film series starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and some much lower-grade movies I've seen that just use it for name value, and many parodies of Lugosi's portrayal, including Adam Sandler's impression of him in the Hotel Transylvania series, as well as leading the book's undead expert Abraham Van Helsing to be considered the definitive vampire hunter. And with the worldwide lapse of the Dracula name and source material into the public domain in 1962, well, now anyone can present their own version of the classic undead bloodsucker. Some well beloved, and some not as much. Just typing Dracula into IMDb brings up hundreds of results, many of which try to place the Dracula character into different themes and settings, including Dracula in the modern age, Dracula in the spoof film, Dracula in a western, Robot Dracula, Dracula vs. Batman, Dracula in a woman's prison, and today's offering, Dracula in space! Also, the year 3000! Now, I've actually known about this movie for years, practically decades, as I remember reading about it on Wikipedia back when I was just starting high school. Which, yeesh, if you need an indicator of how old both Wikipedia and I are, there you go. I don't remember what led me to the article, but the article in turn led me to the concept of a Z movie. Movies too crappy to even be considered B movies, showing little to no competence in writing, acting, editing, lighting, sound mixing, effects work, and or tastefulness. Many examples of which have been spotlighted on this very channel. In fact, it was through that article and inspired additional research that I was first introduced to both The Asylum, who produced and released many movies of this type, and the show Mystery Science Theater 3000, that riffed on many of these kinds of movies. And that eventually led me to The Nostalgia Critic, and many other video reviewers that helped shape my sense of humor and writing style. So, in a way, this movie is inadvertently responsible for my love of cheesy movies, independent film, media critique, comedy reviews, video making, and my online persona and channel focus. And my status as a clearly stable, successful individual. And yet despite all that, I never saw the movie. Yeah, I read the article and summary, and later on passively watched the trailer and maybe one scene, because that was all that was uploaded to YouTube at the time. But despite the movie's interesting premise and setting, I just never had the intention or desire to actually watch the film that had a part in shaping my life and career. That is, until earlier this year, when I found the DVD sitting on the shelves at a thrift store, and immediately the memories came flooding back. And seeing as how I now have a channel dedicated to analyzing low-grade schlock, I figured that now was as good an excuse as any to finally purchase the DVD and finally watch the thing. Now, I knew that the movie wasn't going to be good. Like I said, it was presented as an example of Z-grade filmmaking, back when I was first introduced to the concept, and since then, I've heard nothing but bad things about this flick. And yeah, what clips I did see didn't convince me otherwise. But then I thought, hey, how bad could it be? I look at stuff like Snakes on a Train for a living. My standards are already rock bottom. And besides, look at the artwork. This is one of the best DVD covers I've ever seen. It just instantly sucks you in with its blend of a horrific skeletal vampire creature emerging from a retro-futuristic circuit board. Even the tagline, "In space, there is no daylight," is derivative, yet paradoxically creative, instantly making you think, how are they going to fend off a vampire in a place where sunlight technically doesn't exist? Yeah, I love everything about this cover. I want a poster of this cover to hang on my wall, where it will stay until the heat death of the universe. Okay, on the back, we're greeted by every stock group shot seen on every horror movie poster of the mid to late 2000s, but never before have I more wanted to see a movie based solely on its cover art. So, despite the warnings of everyone else who has ever seen this movie, I went ahead, popped it in, sat down, and watched it. And having seen it, I can finally say with certainty that, yes, it sucks, and I should have listened to everyone who said so. Let's finally run through this movie, and I'll explain why this isn't a flick you'll want to sink your teeth into. In the far-off future, the salvage ship Mother 3 comes across the long-lost cargo freighter the Demeter, which had vanished off the grid 50 years ago. Eager to score some valuable salvage before the government reclaims the ship, the crew disembarks from their vessel to explore the freighter and see what they can grab. But before they can fully catalog their findings, their ship mysteriously detaches and drifts away, leaving them stranded on an unfamiliar and seemingly dead vessel. What's more, they feel themselves stalked by a mysterious presence, one that may have been responsible for the original crew's disappearance decades prior, and one willing to repeat the process with this new group of hapless victims. Will the team survive their sinister stalker and make it back to Earth? Does this movie have 50% less dignity than Dracula 2000? Now I know what you're thinking. How could they possibly mess up this concept? It's Dracula! In future space! The opportunities are endless! Maybe Dracula survived the end of his book, but was kept in suspended animation for 1,000 years, and people with futuristic technology have to learn how to kill him all over again. Maybe he escaped Earth and built a galactic vampire empire, with a legion of vampire androids that travel the stars, harvesting entire planets for their blood. Maybe he's a cyborg, with extendable fangs that can shoot across the room and drain anyone in seconds. Those are all ideas straight off the top of my head, and I'm sure there are a million more where that came from. Heck, it's not even the first story to feature vampires in space. If they truly didn't know where to begin, there were already a couple things they could draw from for inspiration. If Pinhead, Jason Voorhees, carnivorous critters, and a leprechaun could make it in space, then why not Dracula? Oh, they found a way. Well, I say found, but that indicates that they bothered to look, and didn't just spend an afternoon cranking out the fastest, least original, most effortless script that even Detour would be pointing and laughing at. Yeah, let's call this movie what it is. Generic slasher monster horror flick number 8,456,257.3. A group of idiots end up in a mysterious, supposedly cursed place, where they're picked off one by one, usually save for one or two survivors, then improbably defeat the seemingly invincible creature, who also likely die in the obligatory twist 10 seconds before the credit roll. It's the exact same no-thought, easily repeatable plot we've been seeing since at least the mid-80s. To the point you can't even call these scripts written, as much as pass to the next guy and given a find replace with new names. Hey Steve, you finished with that script? Yeah, I got my movie made. You can make yours now. Just replace Tara, Neil, Harmony, and Michelle with Phil, Quinn, Kelly, and Dennis, and change the hillbillies to werewolves. And I heard Daryl wants to make a vampire in space flick, so make sure he gets it by Friday. Plenty of time. No problem. Thanks, large man. And in line with being a generic slasher flick that can be reused for practically anything, the characters are the same tokens we see in everything. We have the good-looking, self-appointed leader, who's only more tolerable than everyone else because he has the least interesting personality. We have the hot blonde woman, who's just a victim until the script calls for her to turn on God mode and save the day. We have the aggressive, all-brawn, no-brains black guy. We have the perverted pothead, who's also black, so hey, 2 tokens for the price of 1. We have the privileged rich girl, who somehow succeeds in being more whiny and useless than everyone else. And we have the glasses-wearing frail smart guy, who actually has some clue as to what's going on and how to fix it, but everyone just ignores him because... Nerd! And of course, 8 to 13% of their dialogue has to be general exposition or acknowledgements that could apply to any situation, while 85 to 90% is irrelevant whining, uncreative swearing, passive-aggressive remarks, toxic world commentary, or some combination of at least 2 of those filling the runtime. And if we're lucky, the remaining percentage is actually related to this specific movie. Heck, here's my summation of each character's dialogue in the first 20 minutes. Here's a ship we're salvaging. It's safe and you can trust me because I wear glasses that send a computer. Well, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here,
Pretty lady gets spooked.
Hey, cut it out. If you do it again, you'll leave me no choice but to say cut it out again.
Weed.
Wow, this dark ship sure is dark. Hey look, an important plot location. Now for a flippin' remark so nobody feels sad when I die either.
I don't like tiny glasses, man.
You people, do stuff. Or not, I don't care.
I don't wanna.
Yeah, do wanna, 'cause I'm white and you're black. Enough said.
I exist! Let's go home, this ship stinks! No, and I'm gonna explain why using many large words to make it clear I think I'm better than all of you.
Whoa, a skeleton! And since I smoke weed, I'm gonna use snack food analogies to describe it.
I exist!
Yeah, you're a slut.
Ha ha ha, other black guy funny.
I'm gonna assert my authority as the leader's main squeeze to again state that I exist!
I don't like little white lady.
Hey, vagina, the men are talking. Obvious observation misinterpreted as a mind-shattering reveal, followed by smug misunderstanding to show that I'm a pothead. 20 seconds of world building to link script to setting and create identity for movie.
I make outdated pop culture reference.
I say something that's only funny if you're as high as I am. Okay, let's do the obvious thing that of course won't happen because we still have 60 minutes to fill.
I exist!
Shut up, Blondie. Can I look for drugs? No, don't make me raise my voice again.
I will make a profound oh no wait, I'm supposed to be stupid. Hey tiny black man, wait up!
Do I exist?
No, but in the grand scheme of this movie, neither do I. And I could go on like that, but this is a video review, not a Mad Magazine movie parody comic. Judge for yourself which one is less funny. Actually, the big black muscle guy, whom the rest of the crew refers to as Humvee, deserves special mention. Because, even by generic horror movie token standards, this character is fascinatingly badly written. From his first appearance, where he jump scares and sexually assaults a crewmate, to every flippant derogatory remark he makes to every other person aboard the ship, it feels like the writer intentionally went out of their way to make him one of the most useless, unlikable characters in all of media. He does exactly one helpful thing in the entire movie. And even that's easy to miss, because every other time he's on screen, he's finding new ways to make the audience hate him, including refusing to save his best friend's life.
I'll have to set the leg. Hummer, you're gonna have to do this manually.
Leave it up to the big black guy, huh?
Well, there's no other way.
No, thank you.
Could lose his leg here.
It would just be 2 of y'all wheelchair willy pop and test 2 babies on the crew. I can live with that.
What an asshole. I hate that guy, and so do you.
I don't even know what his job is on the team. He's listed as the cargo specialist during the introduction, whatever that means. But if his job is to move the cargo, we never see him lifting any. And if he's there as the team bodyguard, he sucks at that too. Despite multiple scenes where he's carrying a gun, he only ever fires it once, just to nearly Swiss cheese a friendly crewmate. And wherever he's attacked directly, he's rendered completely helpless, requiring another crewmate to save him. At one point, another crew member is suspected of being turned into a vampire, and when the captain looks for bite marks, Humvee nearly shoots him because he can't comprehend what he's doing, despite him explicitly telling him what he's looking for. And when he shows the least amount of competence, guarding the bidden crew member while the rest searches for the other vampires, and even saying she can piss herself if she needs to use the bathroom, well, a crew member who has been turned into a vampire, whom Humvee knows has been turned into a bloodthirsty monster who wants to kill him and everyone else on the ship, starts pounding on the sealed door, and Humvee lets him in.
Did you all take stupid pills this morning?
You know, I don't usually play the race card. I think it's the most worthless excuse given when a movie or character isn't well received. But in this case, yeah, it feels like whoever wrote this character had a particular hatred and or cluelessness toward a certain ethnic group. Even with the grade of movies I usually tackle, I don't recall the last time I've seen anyone this specifically engineered to be as worthless and hateable as possible. What audience is this movie even aiming for? What mindset do you need to be in to have this level of spite for a character you're writing? Oh, that explains it. Normally I wouldn't even be giving this amount of attention towards who's usually the first to go in these types of movies, but, well, guess who lives to the end? Not since Lawrence from Detour have I been so baffled by a character's purpose and depiction in a movie. Except I feel dirtier having to watch this minstrel show. It's like the pre-alpha version of Velma. Just changed the gender and ethnicity, switched from Dracula to Scooby-Doo, and presented them as a character we're supposed to like and sympathize with, and this movie becomes frighteningly prophetic. Case in point.
I mean, playing God, removing brains, that's some white people shit.
Excuse me for saying, all this blood-sucking stuff, that's some white people shit, right?
Now, despite the characters they're playing having as much dimension as the paper their lines are scribbled on, the movie has a surprisingly prolific cast list. That's B-movie action legend Casper Van Dien as Abraham Van Helsing, yeah, we'll talk about that later, whom mainstream audiences probably know best as Rico from the Starship Troopers franchise, Amok from Alita Battle Angel, and maybe Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat Legacy. But the guy has over 3 decades of acting experience in soap operas and action-adventure TV shows and movies, including, yes, multiple Asylum movies. He's like Bruce Campbell, or C. Thomas Howell, or Lorenzo Lamas. His name alone is the selling point, because you know he's going to be the best part of 95% of anything he's in. Unfortunately, this is that 5% exception, but hey, great to see you anyway, CVD. Here's hoping you never get CVD. Erica Eleniak, playing Aurora Ash, is probably best known for her role as Shawnee McClane on Baywatch, and has since had her own B-movie action career, and quite a few reality show appearances. The previously mentioned Humvee was played by the late, great Tom Lister Jr., professional wrestler and character actor extraordinaire, including roles in Friday, Universal Soldier, The Fifth Element, Santa's Sleigh, The Dark Knight, and a surprising amount of music videos. Oh, and he voiced that miniature fox from Zootopia. Not the worst thing to go out on. Mina Murray is played by Alexandra Camp, a German actress who's done German movies and shows. But she was in 2001 A Space Travesty with Leslie Nielsen, so she has my condolences. Grant Swanby plays the Professor, and he's been in almost 100 TV movies and shows. Most recently, a recurring role in the Apple TV Plus original Invasion. Oh, and he was also in a Starship Troopers movie. And then there's Coolio. Yes, that Coolio. Playing, and I'm not kidding here, a drug smuggler named 187. No, I don't know why they didn't call him 420, especially since that name suggests they originally had Ice-T or Dr. Dre in mind. And yes, he is the best part of the movie. Now, like Humvee, he also comes dangerously close to being a spiteful racial caricature with no redeeming traits, but Coolio at least seems aware he's acting in garbage, so hey, he turns the acting dial up to 11 doing whatever he thinks he's doing. If the filmmakers don't care, then why should he?
Human jerky. I wonder, is it spicy?
Don't touch it!
It's one of your ex-boyfriends, huh? Sand. Ain't nothing but some damn sand. Think it's worth something?
What's that?
Oh, a metal plus sign. This dude was into mathematics. That explains everything.
You've been smoking 100 kilos a day for 5 years. You understand what I'm saying?
Not quite that much, but you get the idea, dude.
He's also the first crew member to be bitten and turn undead. And yes, Vampire Coolio is as awesomely goofy as that sounds.
Going somewhere, Wheatie boy? Be on the flip side. Ah! I'm sorry. Did you hit me? Want to see what a real man tastes like? Your wish is my command.
Oh, rest in peace, you magnificent maestro. And rounding out the cast is Udo Kier. Ooh, he's in this too? Great! He'll make a great Count Dracula! Oh no, wait, he's just the previous captain of the abandoned ship the team is searching. Serving as the obligatory guy who was about to die in space by recording disconnected vlogs that spout some space disaster stuff vaguely pertaining to the plot. And I know I often joke about this, but in this case, he is literally reading his lines from an off-screen cue card, which I actually think is how this movie was conceived. They found out Udo Kier was available for 10 minutes, so they quickly scribbled down some generic space horror dialogue, filmed him reading it in front of a green screen, then threw the footage at the writer and told him to write a movie around it. All to prove that Blood Rain isn't the worst vampire movie this actor has been in, and that even an asylum film is a better use of his talent. No, the titular Dracula role, or Count Orlok, yeah, they don't even call him Dracula in the movie, is filled by Langley Kirkwood, a fairly well-known South African actor who's still acting in big projects to this day, including a role in the recent One Piece live-action series. I'll talk about his character later, but oh boy! If Udo Kier was underutilized, I hope they paid this guy by the word. And if you're impatiently waiting for me to finally get to the plot and what the movie's actually about, well, I already did. Like I said, it's every single generic slasher horror monster movie ever made, just set on a spaceship in the far future, which itself isn't that original concept. It's about as bare bones as it gets. The only reason I'm not calling this worse than The Legend of Bloody Jack is because the dialogue doesn't instantly switch off my brain. Oh, it's still the same repetitive, worthless whining and general exposition from every other movie of this type, but I can at least tell the characters apart, and that each has their own unique way of whining.
We shouldn't touch anything. We're still under New World jurisdiction, and the law is the law.
Who died and made you chef this damn town?
I'm gonna have to insist that we check this corpse for illegal substances.
Get the hell out of here. Now!
And when the movie does try to establish the horror identity, it can't even do that right. Besides some characters being named after certain figures from the original Dracula book, the ship they board is called the Demeter, which, 50 years ago, went missing after picking up a cargo of coffins from the planet Transylvania in the Carpathian system. Yes, seriously. It sounds like they wanted to tell the story of Dracula, just with an interstellar makeover, which honestly would have made for a much more interesting plot if that's the direction they went with. But not only do they not do that, they establish that, yes, the original story of Dracula did happen. The characters are direct descendants of the figures from the book, whom they just so happen to also share a name with. It's like that old Rocket Robin Hood cartoon, where everyone just so happens to be descended from the original Robin Hood characters, right down to the exact same names, personalities, and modus operandi. It's contrived, convoluted, and completely unnecessary. And while you could argue that the locations in that show are named after their original counterparts because the characters wanted to honor the legacies and ideals of their ancestors, it's never explained why there just so happens to be a star system named after the Carpathian Mountains that just so happens to be home to a planet called Transylvania that just so happens to be populated by vampires. Without the ties to the source material, I could strangely buy that there's just a vampiric species that evolved on some planet somewhere. But Orlok says that his line has been fighting Van Helsing's for 1,000 years, so he's clearly from Earth. So how did he get to the planet? Is he the reason the planet is full of vampires? What happened to them all? If vampires exist in this universe, why has nobody else attempted to exterminate them? And don't tell me nobody knew where they were or what they could do. If the legend of Dracula and the Van Helsing line still exist after 1,000 years, with the planet straight up named after Dracula's home country, somebody's going to know what's going on. Was it a banned planet? Did whatever government the Earth has declare it illegal to go within 15 light years of it in some attempt to keep the vampires from invading Earth? If that's the case, then why did the Demeter willingly stop to make a cargo run there? Is Orlok Dracula? Was he sired by Dracula? How was he the only vampire to survive whatever happened to everyone else in those coffins? What happened to the original crew on board the Demeter? Did they turn into vampires? How were they defeated if so? And why does Orlok want to go back to Earth considering that's the place vampires are feared and hunted? So many interesting questions that could have made for a fantastic blend of classic monster and future sci-fi stories, and they instead decided to fill the runtime with,
So what the hell is a vampire?
It's sort of like a man, only far more evil, if you can imagine that.
Or if you're gonna be a captain in the future, you're gonna have to learn to have a little patience with the men.
Guys.
And apparently the future is red, since symbols of the Soviet Union appear in some backgrounds. I originally thought they were just left over from whenever they rented this filming space from, but the hammer and sickle appear on the computer's operating system as well, and the established religion was banned centuries ago. So I guess the galactic government of Earth is run by neo-socialists. Something else that would have made for a far more interesting plot and served to give the movie an identity, but we need to wait another 12 years to see communist vampires. But space! Future! Vampires! Surely we're at least gonna get some creative kill shots! Bring on the lasers, bring on the robots, give us some Jason X or Leprechaun 4 action, and soak the floors with blood, battery acid, and whatever aliens bleed. Okay, first of all, don't call me Shirley, and second, nope, we don't even get any of that. Yes, Coolio is bitten and turns vampiric, and one of the team disappears until the very end, but in terms of seeing anyone actually killed off, we don't get that until the 60-minute mark of this 80-minute movie. And wouldn't you know it, when we finally get them, the fight scenes are insultingly underwhelming. When Coolio wakes up undead, he rails on the rest of the team, clearly being much stronger and more agile than his mortal form, and laughing off when Helsing hits him with a pool cue before throwing him across the room. Even when Aurora fills him full of lead, he just shrugs it off like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Alright, he caught him by surprise the first time. They're just gonna read up on vampires, and when he comes back, they'll be ready. No, they just start shooting him again. And when that doesn't work, they just stand there and let him monologue, until one of them finally finishes him off by stabbing him with a wooden pole. Which, considering this is before they learn the vampire's weakness, and at this point only 2 of them even know what a vampire is, lucky guess. Yeah, but I guess seeing more vampire Coolio isn't a downside.
Humvee, please, man. I don't feel so good.
Whoa, dude. Suddenly I feel brand new. Ain't that a bummer Hummer? Do I have to spell it out to you guys? You cannot kill 187! I am a vampire, and ain't nobody bad like me. Ooh. Here, try that again. Pool stick. Unbelievable.
But okay, fine. That was just the henchman warm-up. Count Orlok is still around and thugging, and he's been waiting centuries to finally finish off Van Helsing's lineage. And in the final 10 minutes, he gets his chance. So, we have Casper Van Dien versus Dracula, what the whole movie was building up to, and, armed with his new knowledge of vampires and the blood of generations of vampire hunters coursing through his veins, Van Helsing is going to give us the greatest smackdown on the Lord of the Undead ever put to film. Psych! The fight happens off screen and Van Helsing gets his ass handed to him, requiring Aurora to stake him and put him down. And suddenly, the dog who saved Christmas Vacation isn't his most embarrassing IMDb entry. Not that we'd likely enjoy seeing the Helsing-Orlok showdown if there was one, because God, the camera sucks in this! Give him credit, we get a couple good shots, some competent tracking and tilt work for a few scenes, sometimes long enough to fool you into thinking you're watching a movie. But the illusion is shattered when we get one of the flick's many, many close-ups. I know I like to tease cinematographers who seem to have a fetish for keeping the camera less than a foot away from the actors' faces, but holy hell, if those were fetishes, this director of photography went bankrupt contributing to this technique's OnlyFans page. The camera is obsessed with these actors' faces. And if we're lucky, we'll see their whole face, but a screen full of eyes or mouths is also a frequent possibility. Even shots that shouldn't be close-ups are close-ups. There is literally no reason why we have to be this close to this actor. You know why this technique is only used sparingly in most movies? Because it's meant to create tension, emphasize the mood of the scene and the feelings of the character being focused on. So they kind of lose all meaning when 1, you've never established tension because we don't care about the characters and have no understanding of their situation, and 2, even if we did care, these shots have now been used so many times that we're not scared, we're bored. Suspense comes from surprise and unpredictability. A jump scare isn't scary when we know that there's one every 5 seconds. I want to care about these characters and their predicament, not admire their dermatology work. Which is still pretty nice, and I'm jealous. Now that the far shots are much better, a lot of them are at some kind of angle, frequently tilted to the side or placed at ass height looking upwards. Again, for pretty much no reason. But the movie really loses its mind during hallway chase scenes, where, like other flicks of this ilk, it thinks the best way to be dramatic and thrilling is to be incoherent and nauseating. You know how I said that while the camera in Universal Soldiers was one of, if not the, shakiest I've ever seen, the operators still gave the impression they knew what they were doing? Yeah, this is how that movie would have looked if they didn't. No experience or artistic merit, just somebody rocking the camera, tilting it this way and that, and abusing the zoom function. Not because it adds to the atmosphere of the scene, but because it looks cute. We'll even get scenes where the camera will rock left and right. Thankfully, in a slow, controlled fashion, but still enough to give me the surge PTSD. Did you know this movie had 3 assistant directors? Yeah, I couldn't tell either. And while the editing isn't as bad, they still utilize some really annoying tricks, like playing the same shot several times in a row because they think it emphasizes the shock of the situation, when it just looks like their cat sat on the paste button in editing. But most glaringly, they'll show several shots in slow motion that weren't originally set up for slow motion. Which, okay, now I'm really getting the surge flashbacks. This doesn't have any white flash transitions, does it? No? Good. It's too stupid to be that stupid. I'd also like to point out that this was made in a primarily English-speaking country with mostly American and South African actors, and that the only audio track on the DVD was English. I bring that all up because very rarely is the dialogue in time with the actor's lips, often being up to a second out of sync.
His planet is dead.
So, how'd he get on the ship?
He paid to have the ship pick up a bunch of coffins, I guess, and he was in one of them.
What does he want?
Dinner.
That's provided what they're saying matches what we hear, since in some shots, the actor post-dub is shouting something they clearly didn't say when they were being filmed. If you've ever wanted a movie that makes the dubbing from The Room look professional, hey, this flick has you covered.
What a story, Mark.
The only thing I can bring myself to be impressed with is the set work. I don't know where they filmed this, possibly it's an old military bunker, but it's detailed enough to make me believe this is a massive cargo ship in the far future. Kinda gives me Red Dwarf vibes, come to think of it. And it's big and open enough that, unlike what the Asylum does for most of their movies, it doesn't give off a claustrophobic feeling when everyone is jammed packed in one room. No, they leave that to the camera. So, while it's not exactly the most interesting or exciting place to film a movie, I am impressed that this no-budget flick could still scrape together enough dough to film here. Of course, after Invasion of the Pod People, every set looks impressive. The effects are also not terrible. Okay, besides blood squibs and contact lenses, the movie doesn't utilize many practical effects, but the ship models are nicely designed and green screened in, possibly because they were originally props for the super obscure and short-lived series Space Rangers, which likely failed because Buzz Lightyear priced himself out of the market so he could disappoint people with his own movie. Even the crew dossier we see at the beginning isn't badly put together, and the opening sequence as a whole comes the close to the futuristic feel the movie is trying for. Which is good, because it makes up the first 6 minutes of the movie. Which is going to be even more disappointing later, but at least there's a great big area for characters to stand around and do nothing in. Besides swear. They like to swear. A lot. Also, there's this skeleton, who I think is supposed to be what happened to Udo Kier's character. Yeah, great Spirit Halloween prop, guys. Alright, I put this off for long enough, but I gotta know. Who was the genius behind this movie? Whose mind do we have to thank for writing a script even a kiddie pool will be calling shallow? Who then decided to further bless us by putting themselves in the director's chair to make sure their vision became reality? Daryl Root, huh? Okay, what else has this guy done? Not that it matters, because anyone tied to making Dracula 3000 has to be the sleaziest, cheapest, most talentless hack to ever consider themselves part of the film industry. This guy's actually legit. In fact, Daryl James Root is considered somewhat of a national treasure, and one of, if not the, most prolific South American filmmakers, with a film career spanning almost 4 decades and still going. A good chunk of his films deal with South African politics, specifically the era of apartheid, and its lasting effects even years after its repeal. In fact, his 1986 movie, Place of Weeping, is considered the first openly anti-apartheid movie in mainstream media. Since then, he's also made the first Zulu language movie, adapted the stage musical Serafina to the big screen, won multiple awards for his writing and directing work, and collaborated with big names like Patrick Swayze, James Earl Jones, Ice Cube, and Jennifer Hudson. He's also done some lower-key work, including other horror films, but the bulk of his filmography is pretty highbrow. Okay, not everything he's been involved with have been critical and or commercial successes, I mean, case in point. But this is a guy who clearly knows what he's doing, with decades of experience and dozens of movies to back it up. Oh, he also directed Lake Placid Legacy, but we won't hold that against him. So, how? How did such an acclaimed director, who even for the time was being lauded for his work, get tied to a movie even the Sci-Fi Channel would turn their nose up at? Well, considering the obscurity of this movie, heck, the DVD doesn't even have any behind-the-scenes featurettes, we'll probably never know. But if I had to guess, I'd say obligation. Either Daryl was tied to a multi-picture contract with the studio, or in order to secure funding for the next movie he actually wanted to make, he had to make a more accessible low-concept movie that would generate DVD sales from the title alone. It's a more common occurrence in Hollywood than you'd think. Seriously, look into the behind-the-scenes for the Mike Myers Cat in the Hat sometime. Heck, considering his previous work, I'm inclined to believe that most of the movie's more questionable traits, including the depictions of the darker-skinned actors, were probably studio mandated, just to appeal to the wider post-apartheid South African audience of the time. As always, I have nothing to back this up. You are free to correct me if you know the truth. But again, that sounds like a far more interesting story than the one we got. If someone could make a Hitchcock-style biopic based on the making of this movie, that would be great. See if Vincent D'Onofrio is available to play Daryl Root. Hey, I'd watch it. And that finally leads us to the million-dollar question: how does this movie end? Well, get ready for this. After having to put down their vampirized crewmates, Aurora and Humvee are forced to flee from Count Orlok, also managing to slice off his arm in a bulkhead door. So, we have the team's heavy, an android with extensive combat training, oh yeah, Aurora's a robot, I saw no reason to mention that until now, and one pissed off ancient vampire in a battle for the future of Earth. The stage is set, the characters are all here, it's time for the final showdown, and... I know this looks like setup for an early credits joke, but I swear by everyone who has ever come before me, that's how the movie ends. The ship explodes out of nowhere, and the credits roll. Okay, they discussed earlier that vampires hate sunlight, so they steer the ship in the direction of a binary star system. But I don't think blowing themselves up was part of the plan. Originally when I saw this, I thought it was a joke ending. They couldn't possibly be stupid enough to end the movie here, could they? There's more after the credits, right? Well, there is. They include an outtake after the credit roll, but officially, that's how the movie ends. Needless to say, the first time watching this, I was furious. Like, holy hell! You have everything in place for one of the most epic endings in B-movie horror history, and you decide to throw it away in favor of this non-ending?
You promised these children Krabby the Clown, but all I saw out there was Chibi the Cheapskate!
However, after having to watch the movie multiple times, I've come to the conclusion that technically, this film was never finished. There are multiple sections where it feels like they wanted to do something, but couldn't. Besides the missing battle between Van Helsing and Orlok, there's the beginning of an arc where Orlok promises to make the professor walk again, and even starts to, before Orlok is suddenly distracted and runs off. And yet, the next time we see him, the professor's been turned, so clearly they had a lot more they wanted to show. And the vlogs with Udo Kier I mentioned earlier, there's precisely one instance where you could argue someone is standing there watching one, and the rest are inserted haphazardly throughout the film, including obviously cutting off the ending of the final video and pasting it into the beginning of the movie in a desperate attempt to create a hook. And yes, I'm convinced there was originally going to be a final showdown, where Humvee is likely killed and Orlok faces off with Aurora, the only crew member immune to his abilities. But for one reason or another, we didn't get any of that. They might have run out of time or money, or maybe there were union issues or complications with the filming locations. Or it might have been problems with the actor playing Orlok. As for someone supposed to be the main villain, he's surprisingly absent for most of the movie. Heck, it's mentioned multiple times that he's able to remotely manipulate the ship, including shutting down the self-destruct sequence and ejecting the scavenger vessel. And it's another plot point that's completely dropped. And ignoring the opening and closing credits, the movie's runtime doesn't even clock in at 80 minutes, so yeah, something happened behind the scenes that ended up aborting this movie's production. Am I still mad knowing that? Oh, absolutely! If you make me buy your movie, at the very least have the courtesy to finish it. The ship may have gone out with a bang, but the movie's ending is a weaker, more pathetic whimper that even T.S. Eliot could have envisioned. This movie's bad. Yeah, I can't even muster up more than that. What can I say that I haven't already said about a million other boring dime a dozen Z-grade horror movies? The acting's bad, the plot is almost non-existent, the camera is inconsistent, the editing is obnoxious, and the audio sync is some of the worst I've ever seen or heard. And every time you think it's going to give you something that'll make up for all the nothing you've had to endure, yeah, it was out of the budget, so off-screen that baby. And yet, as bad as it is, it's not even memorably bad. I have seen so many films of this kind that to me, it's just another drop in the septic tank of no-effort dollar bin fodder made for a quick buck. The only reason this movie hasn't completely faded into obscurity is the title and the DVD cover. And what a waste of a good title and DVD cover! This movie's not worth its notoriety, and I almost regret picking this as this year's feature. Technically, the 1989 Monster High movie was worse in that I couldn't watch it all in one sitting, but at least stuff happened. It was 80 minutes of some of the most bizarre shit and inconsistent total shifts I've ever seen, and it gave me plenty of material to work with. This movie was a struggle to get through, and even more of one to talk about. I tried. I really tried to make an interesting review with what I was given. And if I failed, well, I'm sorry. The only reason to watch this is for Coolio. In which case, I recommend just taking all his scenes and uploading the montage to YouTube, then throwing the disc in the trash. It did introduce me to a very talented writer and director, though, whom I'm not going to hold this movie against, as I'm pretty sure even he's forgotten he made this film. And now that I've seen it, I can also put a lid on nearly 2 decades of morbid curiosity, finally knowing what the movie that's had such an inadvertent influence on my life is actually about, and that I'm never going to think about it ever again. So happy Halloween, enjoy your celebration, and rest easy tonight, knowing that this is something to leave out of your monster movie marathon. If you really want a horror movie to end your night with, then just go watch Monster High 2.
You should wait for me.
We're in disguise.
Sunglasses are not a disguise.
Yeah, still better than this movie. Hey there, you reached the end of the video. The names scrolling are the awesome people who are keeping the channel going. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Sukaretta. Thanks for your support. If you'd also like to see your name here, please consider heading over to my Patreon, where you can choose a tier and reap the rewards within. And while you're here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It's how these videos get noticed, and what encourages me to continue making them. Whatever you decide, stay awesome, keep watching, and I'll see you next time.